Okay, welcome to part 2 of lecture 1. Now we're going to think about defining what services are. Services have traditionally been very difficult to define, and I've kind of made that point when we're looking at the contribution that services have made to our economy, right? It's hard to measure the contribution because it's hard to measure what services are. So we have some definitions here. So service is an act, performance or experience that one party can offer to another that is essentially intangible. So intangible means that you can't touch it, it has no physical properties to it, and does not result in ownership of anything, but nonetheless it actually creates value for the recipient. So, and we've got the definition from our textbook here. Now, a simple way of doing that, so that's like more of an academic definition, but a simple way of defining it is something that may be bought and sold, so that you can actually exchange it within the market, but you can't drop it on your foot, right? So if I have a phone here, I can drop this telephone on my foot, bang, it hurts, it means it's a product, right? It's not actually, the product is a good, it's not actually a service. Again, I've got a stapler here, I can drop this on my foot, so I wouldn't consider this stapler in itself to be a service, right? So that's one way of defining services. A simple way of doing it, if you can drop it on your foot, it's not a service. If you cannot drop it on your foot, well then it probably is a service. Or you go deeper into understanding what services are and whether it constitutes a service or not. So services are also about value creation. Now, value is created for both the buyer and the seller in a service. So if it's not about creating value for somebody else, then it's probably not a service. It could just be like you doing something you enjoy that no one else wants to pay for or gets any value from, then that's not a service. So really think about service, you're doing something for somebody else, and you're doing that because they value it. So let's look at the framework for developing and delivering customer value, because service is about value creation. So let's think about how we develop and deliver customer value. So first of all, we choose the value. Now, as marketing students, advanced marketing students, you should sort of understand these concepts pretty simple. Segmentation, targeting, position. So we STP, we've got that bit here. We've got the market focus. We have unique value proposition. And these relates to chapters 2 and 3 in our textbook, which we'll be dealing in the future. Right, then once we've chosen the value, then we create the value. And this is through service quality, or sometimes called ServQual. We look at the price, the customer service. So customer service is different than services marketing. Customer service is how, we'll be looking at this in more detail, but it's like the face of our service delivery. Website and channel strategy, and these covered in chapters 4 to 7 of the textbook, 9, 10, 11 and 14. Right, then once we've created the value, we need to think about communicating the value. And these are through things such as advertising, public relations, selling, web service encounters, and these are dealt with chapter 8, 10 and 13 in the textbook. Now I want to get a little bit deeper with you and think about service dominant logic, or sometimes called SD logic. So I've explained to you and made the argument that services are different than goods, and we've had a definition from the textbook that define what services are. But as research into services marketing continues to evolve, we realise that it's even more tricky than what we first thought, and we have this idea called service dominant logic. Now this theory, this logic argues that all products are valued for the services they provide. So up to this point I've said, well, there's a difference between goods and services, and services actually dominate our economy, blah blah blah. Using SD logic, we say everything is service. 100% of the economy is services marketing, all right? And we go, well, how can that be possible? When we delve down into it, we look at, well, when we exchange things, service is the fundamental basis for exchange. This is foundational premise 1. There's more in here about indirect exchange masks the fundamental basis of exchange, which is effectively saying, if I buy a drill, you think, well, what Kevin said before, that according to the traditional classification between goods and services, a drill would be considered a good. But then you think about it, well, why are people actually buying a drill? Is it to have a tangible product, or is it to be able to use that product? And the value that people get in having a drill is not actually, being able to touch it and put it on the shelf, it's actually being able to use it. So in the service that the drill provides to us, that's where we get the value, and therefore the actual drill itself is just embedded with the services that other people have made to create that drill to transfer the value through us. And this way, indirect exchange actually mask the fundamental basis of exchange. Goods are a distribution mechanism for service provision, like in the drill. It's actually the good that's distributing the service. Operant resources are the fundamental source of strategic benefit. And we've got operant and operant resources. Operant with a D resources are basically physical goods. Operant are the skills and knowledges that we have as human beings. So really when we make value, the value comes through one human being, the skills and values that they have, being able to transfer it to someone else. All economies are service economies. Now we've got axiom 2. Value is co-created by multiple actors, so that means a buyer and a seller, like one person, two people, there's always two people involved in there, and it always includes someone that benefits from the exchange, right? Actors cannot deliver value, but can participate in the creation and offering of value propositions. A service-centered view is inherently beneficiary orientated and relational. Now, those of you who had me for principles of marketing or marketing in the past understand how important relationships, especially customer relationships, are to marketing, and this foundational premise 8 reinforces that. Now axiom 3 or foundational premises 9 says that all social and economic actors are resource integrators. So we use our resources and we integrate them together to make something better. Number 10, value is always and uniquely and phenomenologically determined by the beneficiary. And what that means is different people have different perspectives of value and what someone, and we determine that ourselves. So phenomenologically means in our own brains or within our own self, right? So, and it's uniquely, so it's the way that I value things is going to be different to someone else. So let's have a look at this Galaxy phone here. The way that I value that phone is generated and understood and perceived differently for me than it is to say someone else. And that explains why some people buy an iPhone and some people buy a Galaxy and different things, right? Now, value creation is coordinated through actor-generated institutional arrangements. And that effectively means, like, right now I'm lecturing you guys about services marketing and I'm providing a service to you, okay? But this service is being delivered through an institution which is called the University of Tasmania. And we find that with most things, if you go buy a car, often these services are through actor-generated institutions such as the car yard or through cars.com.au or all these different types of things, right? So service dominant logic is basically saying services highlight or are involved or are part of the underlying reason for all forms of exchange within an economy and value within an economy. All right, now let's have a look at the services and how the intangible elements dominate value creation. So services typically have tangible and intangible elements, and we have a continuum here, which is called the Shostak tangibility continuum. So it's quite old, it's quite classic theory. In here we can see something like salt is very tangible dominant, because if you buy a salt, you can crunch it, you can see it, you can taste it, it's there, it has physical properties. Whereas as we go through the continuum, something like professional service, so think about accountants and stuff, when you go to your accountant and you get your bill, what is it you're actually paying for? Sure, they might give you, a booklet or they staple a heap of sheets together and go, here's your tax return for the year or your consulting or whatever it is. So there might be some physical elements to it, but you think about what is it that you're actually paying for, and it's the advice that they give, right? It's them telling you what to do, or them, as an accountant, it's them submitting your tax return to the governing authorities to make sure that you're not going to end up in jail or or getting a big tax bill or whatever it is for tax evasion. So really the value is something that you can't touch, is intangible. And again, things such as hospitality is classically considered a services industry, and often a lot of our services theory has been developed in these types of industry, like hospitality. But again, you go to a hotel, there's someone that's serving you, we even call them servers or waiters, and they come out and they bring you food and stuff like that. But there's still a lot of tangible elements related in that service industry, such as you go to there's chairs, there's tables, there's plates, there's things, there's a steak, there's all these things there, right? Okay, so the next part is let's think about the powerful forces transforming the service economy. So we talk about a hollowing out effect of our economies. And this is when the shift from manufacturing services, I think in Australia, we used to make cars here in Australia, we used to make lots of physical things here, manufacturing. So it means that less actual things are made. Now, we also have an outsourcing of service tasks to countries with low wages. A lot of things that used to get made here, we go, well, we don't really need to make them here. It's cheaper to make them in different countries. Or like, the call centres, rather than paying an Australian that has higher wages in Australia, we go, well, we don't really need to employ Australians to answer the phone, so we can actually outsource the telephone, the call centre to different third world countries or developing countries. Now this is starting to hollow out because you go, well, rather than having a manufacturing like Australia, we used to be able to make things, make cars, make machines, but now we don't do that. It's all intangible, so people call that the hollowing out effect. Now, the deregulation of services, of key services such as health, telecommunications and airlines are becoming an issue as things become more privatised. So in Tasmania, we have a health system here. We have public hospitals. So we have the Hobart Hospital, and we have the Launceston Hospital in the Burnie, and we have the Mersey Hospital in Devonport area. So they have public ones. We also have private ones, and these they're not run by the government, but people that have private health insurance, or indeed if you just want to have, pay for your services, health services, you can just go straight there. So a lot of key services that are traditionally provided by government or being heavily regulated are being deregulated and left to market mechanisms to govern, what happens in there. Now, also social change, such as dual income families. A lot. You got mum working, you got dad working, rather than just dad working and mum staying home. So that's quite a big social change in the last couple of decades or generations. We also have an emergence of global middle class. These are big demographic shifts or social shifts within our societies. Now there's more demand for better services such as hospitality, entertainment and travel. As we consume more and more services, we actually become more and more picky about what services we use, and we demand better and better services. So, and the people that can provide better services end up with the market share and end up being more profitable. So there's a massive incentive for organisations to get better at providing better services. Now often professionals are time poor, so the increased demand for services such as cleaning and gardening. You're working a lot during the week, and then you get to Sunday, either you want to have the day off and a day of rest. So you don't want to do your own gardening, or you have to work on Saturday, so you go, I'm going to be working on Saturday anyway, so rather than doing the gardening, I'm going to get someone to do my gardening for you, which according to me makes a lot of sense. Now the differences between goods and services. So we talked about what services are. When we actually divide them up and think about the key ones, we've got these 4 key things. We have intangibility, which means we focus on that a lot. That's number 1. You can't touch it. You can't drop it on your foot, right? Now there's 3 more. Heterogeneity, which basically means the variability in services. So if you make a telephone, which can classically or traditionally be viewed as a good, it comes off the factory line, and every single Galaxy S20 is going to be the same. All right, there might be like micro differences to it, but there's a lot of heterogeneity, which means that there's the sameness going on in there. With services, like this lecture, I deliver this Teach Services Marketing each year for the last, 5-6 years. Every year it's different, right? And again, because one, it gets updated, but even if I was doing one workshop with one group of students and another workshop with another group of students, because it's a service, each workshop's going to have a different experience. I mean, the guts and the value is the same, the core values are the same, what you get, the benefit that you get is the same, but the way that it's delivered, the way that you interact is going to be very variable. Now, also perishability, which means you can't store it, right? So you think of baked beans, make a heap of them, every tin's the same size, got the same formula, blah, blah, blah. You put it on the shelf, and that's going to be great, and you can keep it there for quite a while, right? It's got a long use-by date. But with a service, it's not like you can store it. So as you provide it, it perishes. Now, think about if you're mowing someone's lawn, which was what we were talking about before. It's not like I can mow your lawn for 3 weeks in a row and then store it and then bring it out. You want your lawn mown, I'll grab, one off the shelf. It doesn't work that way. You can do that with tin, baked beans, and you can do that with a lot of goods, but you can't do that with services generally. There are some things we can do, like we can record lectures, so we can store it for a while, but by the nature they tend to date and be difficult in that way. Now we also got the simultaneity, which also means inseparability, which means you can't separate the consumption of the service with the production of the service. Whereas with goods, you can make them in the factory and then ship them out to the customer. Whereas with services, think of like you go get your hair cut, you can't make a haircut in the factory and then pre-ship it out to the customer, right? The customer has to come to you and you provide the service, so the production is happening at the same time as the consumption of the service. So these are the 4 key things that they're quite important to understand what makes services different from goods. Now, differences between goods and services. I have a list here. So we talked about most services cannot be inventorized, which means stored, the perishability part. Now we have the implications may be that customers may be turned away or have to wait, and often you'll see for services we have lines, and we're going to be looking at how we manage that coming up. How do we actually store our services? How do we manage demand for our services? Balancing productive capabilities, and usually it means people have to wait in line. So we smooth demand through promotions, dynamic pricing and reservations, and we work with operations to adjust capacity as well, so put more people on in busy times. Now you can go through this table, there's quite a few implications in there. I don't want to go through all of them because it's going to be quite long, but we'll be dealing more with these as we go through the lecture series anyway throughout the unit, and we'll be applying some of these implications and how we manage those to case studies. Right, now the differences between goods and services. So most services cannot be inventorized, which means put in inventory. Intangible elements dominate the value creation. Services are often difficult to visualize and evaluate, which means then it's harder to communicate the value to our customers. Customers are often involved in co-production, the co-creation of value of these services. So we can't just make it separate to the customers and then ship it out to them. They're actually involved. And usually the more we involve our customers in this co-creation or co-production of services, the better our services become. People are often part of the service experience, which means the human resource management functions become exceptionally important for us as marketing people, because marketing, a lot of it's about services. A lot of services marketing is about people. We've got people providing the service, and we've got people experiencing the service. So it's a massive amount of what we do as services marketing is managing people. Now, operational inputs and outputs vary wildly. The time factor often assumes great importance, and the distribution through non-physical channels. So these are some of the things we'll be working through as we go through the unit anyway, and how to manage for these differences between goods and services. Now, here is another continuum, which is about services. So services are usually more difficult to evaluate. So here we've got how product qualities affect ease of evaluation. So if you think about what makes a good service or a good product in general, something like clothing, you go, well, it's actually easier to evaluate clothing or furniture or a motor vehicle because they're tangible, right? And these things then are high in search quality. So if you want to look for clothing, you could go, well, I want to find a t-shirt or a shirt, and you go, I want to have this size, and you go, I want to have this type of style. So you could type in the size, the style, the color, blah blah blah. All these things you can search for, right? And this applies to most goods. Whereas somewhere in between, such as restaurant meals, lawn, fertilizer, and vacations like holidays, these are high in experience qualities, because what makes a good vacation is the experience that you have, right? You can't really search for experiences. You're really relying on other people's experiences. So that makes it more difficult to evaluate. But the most difficult to evaluate are these things in high in credence qualities. And these are such as computer repair. Like, how do you know before you employ your computer repair guy that he's going to do or she's going to do a good job? You don't, right? Legal services. How do you know if your lawyer's a good lawyer until after you've had the service, right? So a lot of these things are based on credence and qualities, and that means the credibility of the service provider. And if you're anything like me, I like to evaluate service providers that have a good reputation. So big companies that actually spend time and effort promoting their products, because you know if they're going to promote their products, they're going to spend money telling people about it, they're more likely to back it, right? And the most important is customer referrals. So if you go, well, you know, what were they like? Someone says, I used that company and it was great, yada yada. Basically, they are reinforcing the credibility of that service provider. So, and this research was published in the Marketing Services Journal. So a good one to look up when you're doing your assignments. Here again is another difference between the services and the difference between services and goods and how to manage them. Right, so that ends part 2. Part 3 we'll be looking about how services differ from one another and how we categorize those.